Are you looking to get ready, be prepared, and transform your financial future? Then you've come to the right place. This is the Get Ready Money podcast with Tony Stewart, where Tony has insightful conversations with financial experts who are changing the way we think about money. Catch up on the latest financial trends and hear practical advice from Tony and his expert guests so you can build healthy habits that work. Be empowered with tips for implementing small changes that can have a big impact on your financial future. So sit back and get ready to hear from today's guest.
Welcome to the Get Ready Money podcast, changing the way we think about money. I'm pleased to be joined today by Adam Holt. Adam is the CEO and founder of AssetMap. In this episode, we'll be discussing Adam's thoughts on how we can change the way we think about money and a better way to make financial decisions. Adam, welcome to the Get Ready Money podcast.
Thank you, Tony. It's great to spend some time with you.
Yeah, excited to have you here today. This is a question I start off all the podcast interviews with is, tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your origin story?
My origins? Well, it depends how far back you want to go, Tony. I think as it relates to the world of money, I was a kid who did not grow up with money. Single parent raised me, taught me work ethic, brought me to Philadelphia, came back after college, and took a job in finance, actually, that I got at a trade show, or not a trade show, a job fair, doing financial planning when I was 24 years old. So that was how I got into the business of financial planning 25 years later. I worked with all kinds of net worth families, was lucky enough to join another firm in my early years, another team, and learned the business of estate planning and asset management from them. And during that whole process of 25 some years, I built a firm to a good amount of AUM, as well as a significant amount of insurance production on the estate planning side, and created AssetMap as a tool to help my firm accelerate the conversations with clients who had complexity and help them make more decisions. And that basically went viral in 2012 when I showed it at a conference of what I was doing in the business. So today, the origin of AssetMap as a technology tool used by financial advisors literally around the world in multiple currencies, thousands of advisors, millions of people. It's pretty amazing how much it's affected the world of finance.
Well, that's fantastic. So, as we talk about starting a company and everything, there's a lot of people out there with a lot of ideas. Where did it come up for you where you go, okay, now is the moment, and now I'm ready to start a company? What inspired you to take that next step?
I was nervous all the time about it. Although the irony behind it is I've started several projects that have become companies, mostly because I'm a creative person. The irony behind AssetMap, which is a visualization of a household's financial decisions and all the people that matter to them in those decisions, is that I come from an art background. So my passions are building furniture and doing renovations and doing artwork with my kid. And really, there was very little application of creativity in our space, as you know well, right? We're used to pie charts and burn down charts or mountain bar graphs. That's pretty much the extent of our graphical nature in our business. And what I really needed to do was actually understand what was going on in people's lives at an early on point in the business. So I would actually draw, Tony, visualizations, almost cartoons of what was going on in people's lives, just so I can keep it straight. I had done a bunch of mind mapping work in my early, we'll call college years. And I used that technique to actually map out all of my notes during classes, economics classes. You can imagine I used mind mapping because I would draw. And that was basically what I did and applied it to finance. So the interesting thing is that I didn't really intend on creating a company. I just wanted a solution for myself. The challenge was, Tony, that it became so unscalable to create these visualizations that the clients loved, these bespoke, almost cartoon drawings of their financial life and their family. They wanted that at the end of the meeting. They didn't want my 80-page financial plan. So it was just becoming untenable to have a person draw these all day long. So I had to invest and create a technology solution by myself for myself. And that was the roots of making it into something more than just a kitschy, unique, fun diagram. I think getting a scalable diagram was not easy because you've got millions of different iterations. Every family looks slightly different. So that was a real big challenge. And I think, but look, after doing this now, looking back, it's a lot easier. Creating the company, as you're well aware, takes a lot of anxiety and a lot of guts and a lot of impact on your family and your business and your time. Looking back, when they work, it's seems like the best decision. There's plenty of friends we have that didn't work out, and it was so. There's a good amount of anxiety, I think, behind creating a company.
Well, and I think that's good for people to know is, and sometimes, if they have an idea is that, you can partner up with somebody. But I think what's most fascinating about Asset Map is that you point out what people, in my experience, really want to know. They want to have that overview. Is I've given clients very long reports, but the part they appreciated was a one-page summary of the highlights. Here's the takeaway, here's a summary of the issue, and here are some options. And even the majority of advisors didn't really want to read an 80-page report. They might glance through it, but nobody wants to read an 80-page report.
The report is supposed to convey some conclusion. Remember that? Remember when we were kids in high school, we'd have to be asked to write a report. And of course, you'd think that if you wrote a 10-page book report, it must be really smart and thorough. But somebody has to actually consume your 10-page report and try to figure out if you really understood the book you read or whatever you're reporting on. They're trying to get some clarity. They're not trying to recreate the research. They want to know, what does it mean? And that's where I think we missed the boat in financial services a lot. We decided at some point that the analysis was the presentation. And I think the only reason that worked, especially in acquiring assets and earning the business, is that we looked super smart to the point where we made it look to the consumer like we were so smart that they would never want to tackle this on their own. So I must hire these guys because look at the depth of their research. I wouldn't even know how to start page 1. And I think we actually did this as a shell game, unknowingly, to show how important it was for us to be involved in their financial decision. But I think we did it at the detriment of empowerment. We'd never really focused on literacy of the client and helping them understand their own world. We just focused on their dependency upon us. And the 80-page report supported that. The Morningstar analysis, as great as it is for us to help make decisions, it's really, when I use that with the client, they're glazing over. They don't know where to look. And so I think the real hope of what we've been focusing on is, how do we empower the client with transparency on their own life at a level that they can manage, and then educate them to lift them so that they make better decisions throughout their lifetime. And if we're helpful in that, we'll keep the business long-term. We don't have to intimidate, overwhelm, and basically make this a very difficult experience. They're asking for help. They're not asking for intimidation.
Yeah. Now, and to me, lately, I've been likening it to the medical field. Is when you go in to see a doctor and they say, you're going to have knee surgery. They don't give you a big textbook and say, here's a history of knee surgery, and here's my report that I presented at the Medical Institute of all the things that could potentially happen during knee surgery. They go, hey, you're going to have knee surgery. Here's some of the pros and cons, and here's some takeaways for you to think about. And if you want to do a little more research, you're welcome to do the research. And I think that's an important lesson for us to take away is, that we can blind people with their knowledge, but they're already coming to us because we know something and they want to take care of that. So
I don't know if you've had knee surgery. Have you had knee surgery yet? Or
I have
hip
not
surgery
had knee
or
surgery.
shoulder surgery? Okay, so you're not old enough. So I keep postponing my own shoulder surgery, but when I did get prepped for it, I'm gonna build on your analogy. I've been in a couple of these things, taking older parents to these doctors, or if you have kids that eventually get hurt, you get an X-ray. One of the best analogies that I would hope that the listeners really take on and just put yourself in these shoes. When you walk into that physician's office who is diagnosing a specific problem, like you're something with your knee, if you notice, they won't just ask you questions about what pains, does this hurt, does this, right? They ask you, well, what did you do to cause this problem? Well, how did it happen? They want to understand the etymology of what happened to get you to this point. But 99% of the time I've been in the meeting, they do show you something very important. They show you the X-ray. They put it up on the wall or the screen today, and they point to you and they say, do you see this here? This is where it's broken or cartilage is worn, or this is where the arthritis is, whatever it is that they're pointing out, right? Or here's the, God forbid, here's the tumor, right? They're showing you exactly that it's not just me explaining it auditorily. They're showing it to you visually, which we all know 65% of us are dominated by visual learning. They're showing it to you so that you're actually saying, okay, I think I'm starting to understand the problem and why I'm having the pain. There's an important aspect of that has been lost in finances. We don't show people the pain or the cause of the pain in a way that they understand. When they look at you, look at a knee, you see it's a knee. Okay, I can see that's a knee and there's a bone inside of there. Okay, fine. I don't know what to look for once you're looking at the knee, but I think that's the real key of what we've been doing at AssetMap is, can you show the X-ray to the client and help them understand their own structure, their own body type, if you will, and what needs to change and what needs attention, where there needs to be a fixing and filling. And interesting that Fisher-Price process is used by physicians, it's used by consultants, but it's missed in financial planning. Why is that?
That is the $1 billion question. I guess with inflation, it used to be the $64,000 question when I was growing up. But
yeah,
now it's a lot more. I did have some experience in the first aid field, and and that was one of the first things. It's the mechanism of injury. Like what happened, what led you here. The family history. Because that's going to impact the treatment protocol, and we don't take that approach of diagnosing the issue. And you and I were talking about it pre-show. Is in the medical field, they call it a differential diagnosis, where you go through some of the other things just to make sure you're not missing anything. And sometimes we miss that in the financial service field. I've been spending the majority of the last couple of years, as listeners of the show know, is going very deep on organizing, taking a look at the big picture. And that's what I love about what Big AssetMap is doing is focusing on the big picture and then showing how everything fits into the big picture. Now, I know that's not a great description of AssetMap, but to me.
Yeah. Well, for everybody, it's different, right? I mean, the key is that sometimes I think we focus as an industry too much on whether the instruments that we're buying are good, right? Is this mutual fund good enough? Is this insurance is it inexpensive? Is this annuity serve you, right? Does this bank account give you the right interest rate? We tend to focus on the instrument level decision. But do you remember, and when we started in the business, the big mantra was that 91% of the investment outcome was predicated on asset allocation, not asset selection. So here we are we're saying we're holistic, but we're focusing again on the little detail, whether this is a good enough investment or whether there's a good enough insurance, whether the fees are right, as opposed to looking at the structure. And one of the things that I learned early on, I'm sure you can relate to this, is that when you start dealing with higher net worth individuals, they care less and less about the investment insurance, we'll call it nuance. They care about the structure because they know something that very few other people know. They know that the choice of how you structure your assets, in other words, whose name is it in? Is this in a trust? Is this in the individual's name? Is this in a business? Is this a split interest offshore? They realize that the actual structure of one's investments, that intentionality, yields more impact downstream because of the tax and possibly the estate implication that aligns more with their values than whether they're paying an extra $2,000 in fees or, right? There are bigger problems that are ignored all the time because we're zoomed in too much. We need to zoom out, educate people where everything is, just like a GPS system, right? Here's the map of wherever you're located. Here's where you are. Here's where I need you to be. And I think that context is lost. So the answer to my question I asked you before is why hasn't it happened? It hasn't happened because we haven't thought to empower the consumer to understand. Rather, we're always trying to present to them as opposed to create an opportunity to participate in the conversation at the same level. And that's a big challenge for us because unfortunately there's so little literacy in finances in our society.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's where we have to really listen to the way our clients are talking. It's a reflective listening. Talk to
Mm,
your clients in the way that they're talking to you rather than expecting them to know how we're talking and to understand the words that we're using.
right.
Some clients are going to know certain concepts and other ones aren't. And to me, it was always like trying to figure out where the client, or I work predominantly with advisors, is
Mhm.
what was going to resonate with the advisors. Where were they coming from? What was their level of understanding? We don't look at that. You're
Mhm.
100% on target with that.
Yeah, and I don't know whether the entire marketplace appreciates that perspective, Tony, that they haven't been listening. I think advisors believe that they work in their best interest of their clients. They are altruistic, they are advocates, they are looking out for them. But I don't always know that advisors are getting out of their own head and doing what you said, which is actually seeking to understand first before being understood, which, as you know, that phrase that comes, I believe, from Stephen Covey. There is an opportunity, I think, today, especially given the pressures of our business and margin compression and robo and AI and all the fun stuff that's going to be effectively competing with the human advisor, is for us to be even more empathetic and more of a listener, really understanding the bigger motivations. And I haven't found a better way to do that technically than by excuse me, asking the client if we really understand what's going on in their life. That means we need to see the full financial closet. We need to go on a trip with them, on a little field trip, and say, let me see all the stuff you're doing today without judgment. Let me just walk me through the house, walk me through the closets.
Mhm.
It will start telling you things that they might not have told you explicitly. Right. I tend to think of financial closet as a very interesting analogy because we all have a closet, hopefully a wardrobe. Hopefully, we don't wear the same clothes every day. But we don't let anybody into that intimate space, right? When was the last time you brought your buddy who knows clothing into your closet? Come into my walk-in closet. Half the people on this call, I mean, think about it for yourself. Yeah. Some of that clothes you don't wear. You're never going to wear again. Some of it has holes in it because you kept it from college because you loved your favorite shirt. You're missing entire groups of types of clothing, like what happens if it rains? Like you don't actually have a good raincoat or the
Yeah,
galoshes, or there's 100 things you can probably play with this analogy. And it's important, I think, for all of those in advice listening is, can you ask your clients what's in their financial closet and do they know what its purpose is? And most of that stuff is not intentional. It's haphazardly collected over years. Like, why do you have 4 retirement accounts that you left at your old employer? I don't know. I never contemplated what, I don't know. Is there a problem with that? Yeah, you're not paying attention to any of them because you think they're too small. That's the problem. And so far, you're under managing it. Should we fix that? So I think the key is if we start to allow a trusted professional to come into our intimate space, of which we all know finances has a lot of intimacy. You do a lot of work on this, right? How you think about money is very deeply personal, right? Can we allow people into that space without judgment and say, hey, can you give me guidance on what else is going on? The advisor will start to see and hear and experience different ways to help the client by asking better questions if they can see it.
100%. I want to highlight something you said
Hmm.
because I think this is really key. Is you said to the client, should we fix it? And in that moment, by saying that, you gave the impetus to the client and the power in the relationship to the client. You weren't telling the client, hey, you need to fix this, which is a typical approach. You pointed out the challenge to the client and said to the client, like, hey, now that you know, what do you want to do about that? And that is a huge thing that I don't think a lot of advisors, insurance agents, whatever, different people in the financial services industry get is that you have to let your client be in control of the relationship. It's their money, it's their products,
Hmm.
and You're there to help them make better decisions and to help them understand what they have. But that's key. What you said there, I think we need to highlight again. What do you want to do?
Mm.
I love
I'm
it.
glad you heard that, because I actually didn't realize that I had said it. So I'm glad you brought it back, because that starts me thinking. And I hope for those of you listening, you're thinking about your own language in this space, because how we communicate really matters. I think there's a historical aspect to our business that originally started as solution-based selling, right? Let me sell you a mutual fund. Let me sell you an SMA. Let me sell you an insurance policy, right? So these tools, we were mostly compensated by those tools. And so that made sense that we would actually sell them. In many cases, we all know that financial planning had been a sales enablement process to ultimately earn the business, whatever that might be. I'm glad to see that there has been an evolution from this, but I very much believe that all planning process should be not selling the solution, but selling the problem. And not all problems are created equal, and not all problems are worthy of fixing, and not all are worthy of kicking down the road. Some things need to be fixed right away. One of the things that I think that we are seeing this is now the data side of the experiences. There is a surprising number of households that are purportedly getting holistic financial advice, Tony.
Mm-hmm.
They're on our platform. We came out with this new algorithm called Signals, because we realized that a lot of advisors were only running the retirement planning. They weren't running the calamity planning. Like, what happens if, God forbid, you passed away yesterday? What's your family going to do? These are tantamount, in my opinion, to car rolls on the lot. I trust my mechanic. He gives me the key, says everything's great. Inspection was great. And I break down and there's no air pressure in the tires, in the spare tire. Oh, by the way, the brakes don't really work. Like, how did you let me roll off the lot without that stuff? I thought you were a holistic mechanic. You're telling me that you didn't check the brakes or the airbags or the tires. So my analogy here is that we're seeing an extraordinary number. We just ran this for a huge firm, 500,000 households in Asset Map. 3 out of the 6 algorithmic indicators are in the red, which basically means that if these events happen, I'm going to give you an example of events. If they had a liquidity event, they had to write a big check. They had a disability, long-term disability. They had a loss of life scenario. In other words, we basically automatically run a financial plan, and we just have these events happen today. Could you handle it? And 3 out of 6 out of 500,000 households under best interest standard would lose their house day 2. That's how bad it is on the insurance planning. So I'm not telling everybody should go out and sell insurances. What I'm saying is that you have to sell the problem. Clients do not understand what the challenge is. They ask you, Tony, are we okay? Are we going to be okay? And the default answer has been, retirement looks okay. We need to save a couple $1,000 a month, and I need to change the asset allocation to my allocation. And then you'll be okay. And they're not answering the question of, well, God, what happens if I don't make it home today? Are my kids going to be okay? Right. And that's a huge failure. And I think that despite the fact that we're moving towards, I think, generally holistic advice universally, probably to fend off the margin compression that we're seeing. That's the business argument for doing it, as well as the disruption we're going to see from direct tech. I think we could all do a better job of asking questions and help educating people.
100%. And, I have a personal bias coming out of the insurance space, is how much insurance is overlooked in the financial planning process.
Yeah.
So Adam, let's switch it up. Let's get into the Get Ready Money questions, if you're ready.
Yes, let's do it.
So the first question is, what basic money concept do you wish people knew?
Ooh. It's been said many times, and advisors don't love talking about it. And I'm not going to give credit to the person who said it, because you guys can Google it. I said, don't tell me what you care about. Show me your budget. I'll tell you what you care about. Where people's money is going is incredibly unknown today. And advisors tend to not want to talk about your actual annual expense budget, because it's a tough thing to get people to do. And hopefully they make more money than they spend, and therefore there's excess savings. So we don't have to worry about it. But the truth is that the fastest way to create financial stability is to manage your budget. And I think especially in the United States, we're seeing this pretty much universally in kind of the modern ecosystems, because we have clients in the UK and South Africa and Canada, and we're seeing this pretty prolifically. Most consumers don't understand their budget. So the one thing that everybody should understand is have knowledge and intentionality around where their money is going day to day. And the first step to that is you got to know where it is.
I love that. And I think, there's a whole cottage industry of personal finance gurus who've sprung up just around budgeting, who have millions of followers that, and these people are not coming into the traditional financial planning community, is because those people are answering these very basic questions. Where is your money going? Getting to the very basic core. And then people understand that, and then they go back to those people for more advice instead of coming to professionals. Which is a whole other issue. We could do a whole episode about that.
Totally. But I don't know if you feel that's true, but most financial planners don't always talk about where your money is going on an ongoing basis. Why? Mostly because they're not compensated to go do that extra work. And so they've conveniently left it off the docket. I think it's a huge failure. And most of us could actually add serious value to our clients if we decided to help them at that micro level, which is where's the money going day to day.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think some of the best financial planners that I've worked with have taken the time to do that, because putting in that time up front has very long-term consequences in client retention, because the clients remembered that you helped them out even when you didn't need to. That's right. So that's always key. So Adam, what is one simple thing you can do each year to set yourself up for financial success?
Good question. I've been really stuck on this idea of intentionality versus haphazard, right? It's easy to get stuck in the routine and do the things. One of the things I had to do for myself is I had to set on my calendar, because my calendar drives my life. I actually put on there personal financial review on my calendar. It's Wednesday once a month, late at night when everybody's asleep and nobody's going to bother me. And what I do is I review my asset map around intentionality. I have an asset map printed out. I don't try to do it on the computer screen. I print it and I pen. And my goal at the end of that is to check off every single one of those boxes that represents a financial decision and say, yes, I feel confident, or no, I don't feel confident that there's intentionality behind this. Like, I know why I'm doing it. I know where it is. I know why it's done this way. I'll give you an example. I look at my list. I see on there that there's a crypto Coinbase account. I opened it up a bunch of years ago. Haven't really been paying attention to it. One of my buddies said, Adam, you got to buy some crypto. I'm like, I don't even understand it. Well, all right, fine, I'll do it. I took some money and I did. I'm glad I did, by the way, because the value is more than I put in. Okay. But I really don't know why I'm doing, or when my exit is, or why I'm selling. So recently I was like, wait, why do I actually have this? Do I really know why I'm investing in this? Would I ever recommend a client invest in something where they don't know what the exit plan is? Like, you don't know when you're selling, you're just buying it to hold it. Why don't you just buy a piece of art? At least you'll get to look at it, So I think the real key, and the answer to your question, is how are we asking ourselves whether this serves us with intention or not, and to create a systematic moment where we are investing in that process for ourselves. We tend to do a lot for other people. We don't do it for ourselves. You got to make it important. Don't tell me what you care about. Show me your budget of time allocation. I'll tell you what you care about. And that's really that's the important thing.
Yeah, 100%. Like that old saying, the cobbler has to take care of their own shoes. In the financial service industry, it doesn't happen. So what is one habit that people can change when it comes to their money?
Ooh. What habit can we change with respect to our money? I think we can, it seems like it might be connected, but I think we trust probably more than we actually know. We trust that everything is fine and okay. And then next thing, 10 years later, we look at it and, oh my gosh, I didn't know I was sitting in this account earning 0.3%. I thought that I was earning market rates. Didn't interest rates go up? We don't, and that's part of the inspection process, right? Is, wait, do I actually know what's going on here with this money, right? If we were a business owner, we probably wouldn't let ourselves get away with half the stuff that we let ourselves get away with in the personal finance if someone else was inspecting it and their job was to actually perform better than, zero, right? If I was actually hiring somebody to manage all of the things in my life from my, make the decisions, I would expect that they have some, ownership of it and they're looking at it. Aren't you, like watching the store? I've hired you to manage. But we don't do it for ourselves, and we don't do it at a micro level or create that opportunity. So I think building a habit is not always easy, but the only way to build a habit of inspection and not just trusting, but actually verifying, I think is an important aspect. And I've learned that also as an employer, because now with 40 some employees, how do you know, and they're all over the world, how do you know what they're actually doing? So you got to inspect it if you want to create an outcome that matches your expectations.
Yeah, well, that's powerful advice, and I think it's something, we've been talking about this throughout the show. You've mentioned this many times, is that overview aspect, is remembering what you have and inventorying what you have, so you can go back and inspect it, because that's the thing, is people forget, I had this 401k with an old employer, or whatever. Yeah. So that's fantastic advice. So what money myth are you trying to break?
The money myth I'm trying to break is that finances is complicated and that it is only for people who have lots of it. When the reality is that it literally is the lifeblood of our entire planet now. And if you don't become fluent in it, despite how much you have, you will always have a challenge navigating it. Right? You can't expand your horizons, go to new places without having massive dependency on others if you can't speak the language. And I think the opportunity here is, if we can help lift literacy, and literacy it sounds almost too technical. It says, what, you mean I'm going to go to the library and become literate? Maybe. The key is to become more comfortable and build confidence around the topic, so that you're willing to be part of the discussions and you're actually listening actively as opposed to not listening. And, one of the things I recently started talking about was this idea, and I think you'll relate to it, is the idea that every household has a CFO, a chief financial officer. Whether they like that role or they were delegated it because they knew money better than the other partner in a two-person household, or whether they're single house head of household and they have no choice. You're the default CFO of your household, and you better make financial decisions for your best interest over the long haul. And now if you have other people dependent upon you, now the stakes just went up. But the challenge is that no one was educated as a CFO. What if you're the partner or spouse of that family CFO? You don't know what's going on, okay? You have no idea of the inventory. You don't know where the money's going. You kind of think, is it enough? Are we building credit card debt? Are we saving actually? Are we saving in the right vehicles? Do we have enough cash if we need it? Those questions are not even on your plate. So the challenge is that we typically have a almost delegated system where the CFO is delegated to their financial advisor. So they're like, I'm kind of checked out. I'll deal with the day-to-day budget and the bills, right? The non-CFO spouse or partner is in the dark, may not even have a relationship with the financial planner, if they even have one. And so I think the big opportunity is we need to bust this myth that if you have a financial advisor, they're taking care of everything and you have no obligations. We need to find a way to get empowered. I think it's the obligation of the financial planner. If you're serving a family, your job is to help build confidence and empower them so that they're going to make decisions when you're not in the room. And that means literacy. That means empowerment. That means education. That means involvement. That means accessibility. It means inclusion. It means I'm helping you grow, not just growing your balance. And that's the key. I'm not just trying to make your net worth higher. I'm trying to grow your capacity to make better decisions.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. And I'm with you. I think that the more we can educate and help our clients feel empowered with their money, the better decisions that we're going to make. And to me, as an advisor, I always felt that's when I was helping my clients the most is, for me, the test was if they could repeat back what I told them or recommended them to somebody else. Do
Oh,
you
that's a good one.
understand it to the point where you can re-explain it to someone else? Because if you don't, then you haven't really comprehended what we've been talking about. And I think that's something that's easy to overlook. And it gets back to what you were talking about earlier, the sort of, I'm going to show you how smart I am,
Hmm.
and which has been the way it's been done across the financial services industry as long as I can remember, rather than I want you to really understand this. Even if we don't get to everything on the agenda, I'd rather you worked on the parts that so that you really understand it and can make better decisions. So,
Amen.
for the next question, we're gonna get in our time machine. So we're
Okay.
gonna go back in time.
Nice.
What advice would you give your younger self if you could go back in time, knowing what you know now about money?
That's a good one, Tony. I think what I would tell myself is okay, I have one. This will be revealing, I think, because I think for those, the reality is of being a human, as you can relate to, and hopefully if you're listening, you can relate. You're a human. That we
It's
don't
mostly
always.
humans in my
Okay,
audience.
good. Most I don't know who you're marketing to. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, the audience of people who download podcasts. I I think I messed up a bunch. I did. Looking back, and I have the benefit of that. I was very fearful in the early years that when I started making money as an advisor, that I wouldn't make the next amount of money. So I started hoarding cash. And I did something that I would never have let my clients do. I did it. I did the shoe cobbler thing. I hoarded cash for years, like decades, instead of investing it, because I was fearful. Well, what if the whole thing fell apart? I would need to, and then all of a sudden the market's going to fall apart. I need to have liquidity. I've got a huge amount of equity investments in all these things that are not liquid. I got to hoard cash. And the reason I say this is not to impress anybody. It's to impress upon you that just like all humans, we have fears that basically outweigh our common sense decisions. And as a result, that money stayed idle and liquid for decades instead of being invested in just something like the S&P. And that would have been the benefit of an outside influence or financial advisor if I had enough guts to early on hire an advisor who was not emotional. We think about all the time, well, what is the advisor really doing? Are they picking a mutual fund that's better than I could pick? Are they charging me? Like, they're really going to time the market? No, it was time in the market, not timing of the market. And just my choice to think that I knew better or that my emotional reason or logic was smarter than the market was wrong. And so I watched as I helped people make better financial decisions, and I didn't do it myself until I finally, after 5 years ago, I hired a financial advisor to do what I could do. And I got myself out of the driver's seat. I should not have been in the driver's. So that's the time machine. And I'm sure any of you listening to this, I want you to hear this. There are probably statistically likely areas of your own life financially, if you're a financial advisor, that you're probably not paying the most attention to. And someone from the outside will see it like this and call you out. And I think that could be the difference between your own success financially or not. And I would really challenge everybody to actually go through their own time machine and challenge, would they still make the same decision?
Yeah, no, that's wonderful advice. And I think it also applies to advisors in thinking about working with their clients, is because those are the type of things that clients are going to be reticent to talk about. And you're only going to find out about those things by forming a relationship with your client and asking questions and then listening to the answers. Is you can find out so much when you actually listen to the answers that people give you.
Yeah.
Look for the clues, ask a follow-up question instead of moving on to the next thing on your checklist. And I think for people out there who are getting their personal finance advice, from the internet, is you have to question what you're being told. Become literate. If somebody's on TikTok, with the latest investment idea, maybe
Mm.
ask a few questions about it, like Adam was talking about with Bitcoin. That was still big on TikTok, I think, and it's like maybe
Totally.
it's not for everybody,
It's
I'm just
exciting.
saying.
Yeah,
It's interesting. So
that's
Adam,
right.
last question is,
Okay.
what is your number one tip on changing the way we think about money?
I think that we have to take money for what it is. If you recall, I mentioned something about it's kind of the language of the planet. It's the lifeblood of the planet. It's something you have to choose to learn and understand. I'm not saying you need to understand how the federal government basically processes the federal deficit. I'm not saying that you have to go that deep, right? That might not be appealing for you. It might be aggravating for you in some regards. That being said, there are certain tenets that we need to make sure we understand, and those are the basics. How do assets work? How does debt work? Why is debt good or bad for you? How does that serve you? To become wealthier on the finance side, or even maybe just more financially well, it's going to require that we understand how the game works. You cannot play Monopoly if you don't know how to move the pieces. Okay. And that's the key. It's not a game, but it's a metaphor for most things in life, right? They can be boiled down to little games and sports and all kinds of fun things. If you don't know how to play the game, you read the directions, please. And if you don't know where to go, Google and ChatGPT are not always the best places because they're not contextual to you and knowing where you come from. And that's where I think we can all do a better job of making sure that we actually know how to play the game before we roll the dice. And that way we have a possibility of winning. And so I think the whole key is let's get educated on the basics, how things work, so we can get over the intimidation and create more opportunity.
Fantastic. Well, that's wonderful advice. Well, Adam, it's been a pleasure. Where can people learn more about you? Where can they follow you and your work? Where can they find out about Asset Map?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I think if you pretty much Google Asset Map or myself, you'll find me. LinkedIn is the best way to have a conversation with me. I think that I find myself on that social media channel more than anything else, and that's where I post what I tend to care about. So just LinkedIn, follow me there. Asset Map is as simple as the URL, and I also have a podcast that you might know about where we're challenging everything in the financial services industry called Rethink Financial Advice, and I do that with my buddy Derek. So those are the ways to hear more about what we're doing. I encourage anybody to reach out and, of course, challenge the status quo and let us know what we need to debate in this industry, because I think it lifts everybody. So thank you, Tony,
Yeah.
for what you're doing. I really think it's a fantastic community effort that you're creating in this podcast. And thanks for all that you do in your books. Some just great content for everybody.
Well, fantastic. And Adam, appreciate all the work you're doing as well. And for everybody who's watching and listening, like always, there'll be links to Adam's LinkedIn profile, to the Asset Map website, to the Rethink podcast, so you can check it out for yourself. And as always, thank you for tuning in to the Get Ready Money podcast. Please remember to subscribe. Until next time.